Making EVs without China's supply chain is hard but not impossible. Three supply chain experts outline a strategy. Market Watch, The Conversation, Economy and Politics. Last update September 2 to 2022 by Hu Yin Mak, Christopher S. Tang, Tinglot Day. The immediate challenge is to produce batteries in the US, but the longer challenge will be to secure supplies of critical minerals such as lithium and cobalt. GM's factory Zero Electric Vehicle Assembly plant in Detroit. Two electrifying moves in the recent weeks have the potential to ignite electric vehicle demand in the United States. First, Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act, expanding federal tax debate for EV purchases. Then California approved rules to ban the sale of new gasoline-powered cars by 2035. The Inflation Reduction Act extends to the Obama-era EV tax credit of up to $7,500, but it includes some high hurdles. Its country of origin rules require that EVs and an increasing percentage of their components and critical minerals be sourced from the US or countries that have free trade agreements with the US. The law expressly forbids tax credits for vehicles with any components of or critical minerals sourced from a foreign entity of concern, such as China or Russia. That's not so simple when China controls 60% of the world's lithium mining, 77% of battery cells capacity, and 60% of battery components manufacturing. Many American EVs market makers, including Tesla, rely heavily on battery materials from China. The US needs a rational strategy to build an EV ecosystem if it hopes to catch up. As experts in supply chain management, we have some ideas. Why the EV industry depends heavily on China? How did the US fall so far behind? Back in 2009, the Obama administration pledged $2.4 billion to support the country's fledgling EV industry, but the demand grew slowly, and battery manufacturers such as A123 Systems and Ener1 failed to scale up their production. Both succumbed to financial pressure and were acquired by Chinese and Russian investors. China took the lead in the EV market through an aggressive mix of carrots and sticks. Its customers subsidized raised demand at home, and Beijing and other major cities set licensing quotas mandating a minimum share of EV sales. China also established a world dominating battery supply chain by securing overseas mineral supplies and heavily subsidizing its battery manufacturers. The conversation. Today, the US domestic EV supply chain is far from adequate to meet its goals. The new US tax credits are designed to help turn that around, but building a resilient EV supply chain will inevitably entail competing with China for limited resources. A comprehensive rational strategy entails measures for the short, medium, and long term. Short term, what can be done now? Six of the 10 best-selling EV models in 2022 are already assembled in the US, fulfilling the Inflation Reduction Act's final assembly location clause. The alliance between Hyundai and Kia, which has three of the other four bestsellers, plans to open an EV assembly line in Georgia. Volkswagen has also started assembling its ID4 electric SUV in Tennessee. The challenge is batteries. Besides the Tesla Panasonic factories in Nevada and planted in Kansas, US-based battery manufacturers trail their Chinese counterparts in both size and growth. For the US to scale up its own production, it needs to rely on strategic partners overseas. The Inflation Reduction Act allows importers of critical minerals from countries with free trade agreements to still qualify for incentives, but not importers of batteries components. This means overseas supplies like Korea's Big Three, LG Chem, SK Innovation, and Samsung SDI, which as the SDE, which supply 26% of the world's EV batteries, are shut out, even though the US and Korea have free trade agreement. The conversation. The Korea Automobile Manufacturers Association has asked Congress to make an exception for Korea-made EVs and batteries. In the spirit of a friendshoring, the Biden administration could think of a temporary waiver as a stopgap measure that makes it easier for Korean battery makers to move more of their supply chain to the US, such as LG's planned battery plants in partnership with GM's and Honda. The 2021 Infrastructure Act also provides $5 billion to expand charging infrastructure, which surveys show is critical to bolstering demand. Medium term, diversifying lithium and cobalt supplies. A strong and concerted effort is concerted effort in trade and diplomacy is necessary for the US to secure critical mineral supplies. As EV sales rise, the world is expected to face a lithium shortage by 2025. In addition to lithium, cobalt is needed for high-performance battery chemistries. The problem: the Democratic Republic of the Congo is where 70% of the world's cobalt is mined, and Chinese companies control 80% of that. The distant second largest producer is Russia. The Biden administration friendshoring vision has a chance only if it can diversify the lithium and cobalt supply chains. The conversation. The Lithium Triangle in South America is one region to invest in. Also, Australia, a key US ally, leads the world in lithium production and possesses rich cobalt deposits. Waste from many of Australia's copper mines also contains cobalt, lowering the costs. GM has reached an agreement with the Australian mining giant Glencore to mine and process cobalt in Western Australia for its Ohio battery plants, with LG Chem bypassing China. A way to avoid cobalt altogether also exists: lithium iron phosphate batteries are about 30 per, 30% cheaper to make because they use minerals that are easy to find and plentiful. However, LFP batteries are heavier than and have less power and range per unit. For years, Chinese companies such as CATL and BYD were the only ones making LFP batteries, but the patent rights associated with LFP batteries expires this year, opening up an important opportunity for the US. Since not everyone needs a high-end electric supercar, affordable EVs powered by LFP batteries are an option. In fact, Tesla now offers Model 3s with LFP batteries that can travel about 260 miles on a charge. The 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law set aside 3.60 billion to support domestic battery supply chains. With the Inflation Reduction Act emphasis on supporting more affordable EVs, it has price caps for vehicles. To qualify for incentives, these funds will be needed to help scale up domestic LFP manufacturing. Long term, US critical mineral production. Replacing overseas critical materials with domestic mining falls under long term planning. The scale of current domestic mining is minuscule, and new mining operations can take 7 to 10 years to establish because of the lengthy permitting process. Lithium deposits exist in California, Maine, Nevada, and North Carolina, and there are cobalt resources in Minnesota and Idaho. Finally, to build an industrial commons for EVs, the US must continue to invest in research and development of new battery technologies. Also, the end-of-life battery recycling is essential to the sustainability of EVs. The industry has been kicking the can down the road on this, as recycling demand has been minuscule, thus forgiving the longevity of batteries. Yet, as a proactive step, the Inflation Reduction Act specifically permits battery content recycled in North America to qualify for the critical mineral clause. To make this happen, the federal and state governments could use take back legislation similar to producer responsibility laws electronic waste enacted in more than 20 states, which stipulate that producers bear the responsibility for collecting, transporting, and recycling end of cycle electronic products. What's ahead? With the new law, the Biden administration has set its sights of a future transportation system that is built in the US and runs on electricity. But there are supply chain obstacles, and the US will need both incentives and regulations to make it happen. California's announcement will help. Under the Clean Air Act, California has a waiver that allows it to set policies more strict than federal law. Other states can choose to follow California's policies. 17 other states have adopted California's emission standards. At least 3, New York, Washington, and Massachusetts, have already announced plans to also phase out new gas-powered cars and light trucks by 2035. Yan Mak is an associate professor of operations and information management at Georgetown University. Christopher S. Tang is a professor of supply chain management at University of California, Los Angeles. Ting Long, Dai is a professor of operations management and business analytics in the Carey Business School at Johns Hopkins University.